You have the floor. You can go.
Good morning, bonjour. Je m'appelle Roger Clark. My name is Roger Clark, and I'm a member of the Hassan Diab Support Committee based here in Ottawa. 10 years is an awfully long journey, and although we continue to celebrate Hassan's freedom and his return to Canada, there is still much to do. This morning, our four speakers will discuss some of the challenges that still lie ahead in this ongoing search for truth, justice, and accountability. And I also want to just acknowledge the presence in the room of Hassan's wife, Ranyat Faile, and also Tim McSorley, who is the National Coordinator for the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group. So the four speakers, and I'll list them in order of speaking. Alex Neve, who is the Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada, English speaking. Our second speaker will be Chantal Vallerand. She is the Director of Operations with the Canadian Association of University Teachers. Third speaker will be Hassan Diab, and fourth, Hassan's lawyer, Don Bayne. So, Alex.
Good morning, everyone. Our extradition law and extradition procedures play an incredibly important role, both grounded in respect for the rule of law and upholding respect for the rule of law. On the one hand, extradition procedures uphold the rule of law by ensuring that individuals who may have committed serious crimes are not able to evade or escape justice by slipping across a border into another country. On the other hand, extradition procedures must uphold the rule of law by safeguarding against the clear risk that people will be sought for reasons or in circumstances giving rise to serious human rights concerns, including politically motivated charges, unfair trials, arbitrary detention, torture, ill treatment, and even execution. Over time, Canadian courts have developed important legal standards to guard against extradition to face the death penalty and, in most cases, concerns about torture. But Hassan Diab's experience of extradition on flimsy evidence in a context of concerns about secretive, unsourced intelligence, lending to over 3 years of detention without charge or trial, makes it absolutely clear that Canadian extradition law in 2018 does not reliably protect against serious human rights violations, even when those risks are patently obvious and even when the person sought for extradition is a Canadian citizen. That is why Amnesty International supported the call following Mr. Diab's long overdue release and return home to his family in Canada earlier this year for a review of the case and a commitment to look at reforming the Extradition Act. Recent revelations, however, in reporting from the CBC, that Canadian government lawyers appear to have been much more than just an impartial bystander in this process, but instead may have actively worked to assist the French government get a demonstrably weak case over the very low bar set in the Extradition Act, and to do so by concealing from Mr. Diab evidence that would have significantly assisted in his defense. That takes this case into an entirely different realm of concern: the possibility of Canadian complicity in the injustices Mr. Diab has endured. And that is why Amnesty International has now called for a public inquiry into the case, a call we repeat today. Amnesty International and the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association yesterday, in a response to an earlier letter sent to Minister of Justice Jody Wilson-Raybould calling for a public inquiry, learned that the minister has asked that there be an independent external review of the case. But we know nothing beyond that. Independent and external are encouraging. Review is certainly not an inquiry. It is crucial that this go forward now through a process that firstly ensures Mr. Diab is fully involved, secondly provides an ability for interested parties to actively intervene, third is transparent and accessible to the public, and fourth, certainly ensures that the individual who is entrusted with carrying out the review has all powers needed to compel testimony and disclosure of documents. I'll now turn it over to Chantal.
Merci. Bonjour. Je vais m'adresser à vous au nom de l'Association canadienne des professeurs d'université. The Canadian Association of University Teachers has been an ally of Professor Diab and his family since the beginning. We believe that all Canadians deserve to know why and how the Government of Canada allowed and enabled the suffering and the jailing of one of its citizens in a foreign prison for 1,156 days without proper evidence. Dr. Diab has never been charged. On May 2nd, our organization wrote to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau asking the government to establish an independent and public inquiry into the treatment of Dr. Hassan Diab. We just heard yesterday that the Minister of Justice will call for an independent external review of Dr. Diab's case. Important questions remain concerning the details surrounding this review. We believe that only a public inquiry will shed some light on the recent disturbing revelations on the role that Canadian officials played in Dr. Diab's case. We need to look at the actions of Canadian officials who, according to news reports, withheld information that would have pointed to Dr. Diab's innocence. And our government needs to review Canada's Extradition Act in order to raise the burden of proof required in such cases, along with other provisions that fail to protect Canadians facing possible extraditions. Thank you.
Hello. I spent 10 years in turmoil and suffering, almost 6 years under draconian bail conditions in Canada, and more than 3 years, 3 years and 2 months, in solitary confinement in France. My family and I endured physical, psychological, and mental agony. I did not attend the funerals of my brother or my father, who passed away in the last few years. I missed the birth of my son and his first 3 birthdays, as well as 3 of my daughter's birthdays. I missed and lost so much. I thank the Minister of Justice for her genuine concern over my more than 3 years of imprisonment in France. I wish, though, that she raised the latest CBC's revelation about the unjust, inappropriate role of the Department of Justice in pushing for my extradition. I wonder whether the objective of the Department of Justice is just to win extradition cases, or ensure that justice is done and that no Canadian is extradited to languish in a foreign prison based on unreliable evidence. In my case, it was clearly the former. I would like to ask the Minister of Justice to call for an independent and public inquiry, not an internal one, nor an ambiguous external review. Only an independent and public inquiry would answer our questions and concerns and pave the way for fundamental changes in the extradition law. We would like to avoid any halfway solutions that would lead to half credibility. Full credibility comes only from an independent and public inquiry. Thank you.
At the outset, I'd like to thank, first of all, the Prime Minister and Minister Freeland and her staff for the important assistance they gave in this case in having Dr. Diab returned promptly from France after his release by French investigative judges. Now, in the wake of that, the Prime Minister has called for a lessons learned exercise to determine what went so horribly wrong in the Diab case. How an innocent Canadian on flimsy and unreliable evidence, was extradited under our laws and spent years mostly in solitary confinement in France. That exercise to date has amounted to an internal Department of Justice inquiry. An internal inquiry conducted by the very people whose conduct has been called into question, with respect, is misguided. The DOJ officials involved in this case can't reliably or objectively or credibly investigate their own conduct. Such an inquiry has no credibility. Moreover, the Department of Justice as a group, and the International Assistance Group in particular within the department, are daily defenders and advocates on behalf of the existing Canadian Extradition Act and law. They cannot and will not advise the minister objectively as to the Act's serious shortcomings that produce the serious injustice that we saw in Dr. Diab's case. There must be nothing less than an external public inquiry. Now, Alex Neve mentioned a response from the Minister of Justice yesterday that came out late yesterday. Interestingly, Dr. Diab and his family have heard nothing directly from the government, and we would have thought that Dr. Diab would have been the first person the government would contact to communicate any decision about the nature of the review. In any event, there is a line you will read in the minister's letter, and we don't know whether to be thankful or troubled by the minister's line in the letter in which she has, quote, asked for a, quote, independent external review of this matter, because that language, frankly, is ambiguous. Asked or directed? I should have thought the minister would have directed. Will it happen, in other words? And whom did she ask? That's a question that matters immensely. Who did she ask conduct this? And what does she mean by an independent external review? The Inquiries Act creates a public inquiry mechanism with the power to compel witnesses and documentary evidence, and usually the commissioner appointed is a respected judge. The minister's letter yesterday read in full as a defense of the department's handling of Dr. Diab's case. It is defensive and suggests all was done properly, and then there's a line that suggests, but she's asked for an an external review. So the lengthy defensive prelude preceding that one line causes us concern. This cannot amount, through ambiguity, to a political whitewash. There must be a credible public inquiry headed by a respected judge with the power to compel evidence. And the public inquiry into the Diab case should focus on, one, needed reform of the Extradition Act of 1999, and two, the conduct of the Department of Justice in the Diab case. So, Madam Minister, please confirm that a public inquiry is indeed what you mean. Thank you.
We now have those questions. So I'll pass aux questions.
Est-ce que je peux vous entendre peut-être M. Diab en français, peut-être nous expliquer pourquoi c'est pas satisfaisant ce qu'on annonce dans la lettre?
For me?
You do speak
Yeah.
French, right?
Well, en français, un peu difficile.
Peut-être quelqu'un. Est-ce que quelqu'un?
Oui, je peux traduire. I can translate as you go if you
Yeah.
want to sentence by sentence.
Yeah.
So,
Just the
she's
question,
asking
if
why
I
it's not
understood it.
satisfying.
Yeah, why it's not satisfying?
The letter.
Well, what she has asked for.
The external review, independent review, because exactly what everybody almost
Okay,
talked
I
about,
thought you
and
could say
especially
it en français, that's why. Okay.
especially
Maybe Roger. Okay,
Don
good.
Bayne, he said, he answered the
Why don't
question.
Roger, why don't you say, si vous voulez.
Mais vous êtes?
Roger Clark, je suis membre du groupe de soutien.
Ah, ok.
Hassan, je travaille avec eux depuis longtemps.
OK.
Alors, la réponse de Madame la ministre, effectivement, nous indique en fin de communication, à la fin de la lettre, qu'elle est prête à demander, pas à exiger, mais à demander une revue externe et indépendante. Là, il y a trop de questions à se poser encore pour être satisfait de cette réponse. Pourquoi, par exemple, n'a-t-elle pas répondu directement à Hassan Diab, qui est le sujet quand même de toute cette question, ou même à son avocat? Mais non, c'est une lettre qui a été envoyée en réponse à Amnesty et la ICLMG. Maintenant, les questions qui se posent tournent autour de la personne qui sera choisie, qui sera désignée. Normalement, selon la loi sur les enquêtes au Canada, ce serait un ancien juge ou quelqu'un de cette stature-là. Maintenant, avec quelle autorité la personne désignée pourra-t-elle exiger la présence de personnes, de témoins? Est-ce que la revue elle-même serait publique, comme c'est le cas avec une enquête officielle? Donc, toutes ces questions-là restent à trouver une réponse. Et c'est un peu pour cela que nous demandons à Madame la ministre d'aller plus loin, de nous expliquer et de désigner d'une façon claire ce qu'elle entend par cette revue externe et indépendante.
Et si on l'amène, parce que là, elle demande à ce que ce soit mené, si on l'amène, est-ce que vous voulez à tout le moins que la ministre s'engage à rendre les résultats publics? Si eux n'acceptent pas vos demandes, à tout le moins, vous leur demandez ça, j'imagine?
Ce serait un pas dans la bonne direction. Ce ne serait pas satisfaisant, parce qu'il est évident que, étant donné les méfaits des avocats du département du ministère de la Justice, il y a des choses qui ne peuvent pas sortir facilement d'une manière publique. Et c'est ce que nous demandons. C'est trop important. Les conséquences de cette déformation du système, si vous voulez, a été effectivement la torture de Hassan Diab pendant plus de 3 ans en France, sans parler des années qui précèdent, 6 ou 7 années qui précèdent.
To Mr. Bayne or Mr. Neve, I understand the United Kingdom in the last few years has reviewed and conducted a public commission into its extradition laws, specifically of extraditions from the UK to the US, that seems to have some similarities with some of the issues that the Canadian system faces. I'm wondering if that has come up as a model at all for the type of commission or public review that should be had here.
I'm not familiar with the review that was conducted, so it hasn't come up.
We'll definitely look into it.
No more questions? Pas d'autres questions?
I know it's been addressed, but could you address once more kind of in terms of what you're looking for, in terms of timeline for this public review? Like, what ideally are you looking for from the government in terms of points of, if you could lay it out kind of point form for me.
Well, I think all of us have been very clear that what we believe needs to happen is a public inquiry convened under the Inquiries Act with all of the powers that accompany that, led by a retired or current judge who would have the stature and respect that something like this requires, with the full powers that she or he would need in order to be able to compel witnesses and have full access to documents that are needed to carry out the investigation. That we do not see in the ambiguous language of a review as opposed to an inquiry. In terms of a timeline, this needs to happen quickly. It needs to happen quickly, firstly, because Hassan Diab and his family have waited far too long for justice, have waited far too long for some answers and accountability as to how things went so terribly wrong in his case and why. But secondly, it needs to happen quickly because the Extradition Act is live legislation, and other individuals will have their cases dealt with under this same system. And we all, therefore, have very grave concern that further injustices may be just around the corner, and could even be worse. He ended up in France. There are other corners of the world where an extradition might be to a country where torture and other serious human rights concerns is a daily reality as well. These cases can have grave impact and consequence. So we cannot continue to put off the urgent need to understand the broader questions as to legally, as a matter of the statute and extradition processes, how did this happen and what changes need to happen now to guard against further injustice.
Madam Christian, no more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.